To our Zoomers. Welcome to those who are on Zoom with us. We may have some people from Richmond, Virginia, some from Austin, some from various places in Houston, and other places. I think maybe even one from Canada was talking about coming. So it would be really nice. So we thank you guys for all being here. This is our first meeting in our new location, and isn't it fine? I mean, it's so beautiful. So, I am Jenny Hancock, and I'm the chair for the Austin, for the Houston Ions. What city am I in today? Anyway, but before I get started, I just want to give you some housekeeping things. Of course, you saw they prefer no food in here. After the meeting, we are going to go over to Barnaby's for a further discussion if you're interested. And I'll give you the address after it's over in case you want to join us over there. Yeah. Because it was on the invite, but I don't have it in front of me. Secondly, restrooms, they're down the hall. And so there are two restrooms down the hall. So if you need to use those facilities, you can. I brought some water. There's some little bottles of water out there. If you get really thirsty, get yourself a bottle of water. Okay, so Houston Ions is wholly independent of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. That's a major organization in California. And we are legally and financially responsible for our own activities. And that's why your donations make a huge difference in our ability to succeed. So we really appreciate your donations because there are no paid people on this group. And so we pay for our building and we pay for resources and whatever, websites and all that kind of stuff. So we appreciate that. And Houston Ion serves members and friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and we are a nonprofit organization. So if you decide to donate and keep track of it, ultimately at the end of the year, you may be able to use it on your taxes. We are the Noetic Sciences, the Ions National, is also nonprofit and dedicated to research and education on consciousness, human potential, and personal and social transformation. Houston Ions has been around since approximately 1999, and we're very glad that Jim was on that and Joe was on that, getting that started. So we're very blessed to still have these members still coming and involved and helping move this forward. Please be aware that the views expressed by our speakers and any workshops that we hold, facilitators and participants do not necessarily reflect the views of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. That's legal. I have to say that every time. So, but anyway, so that's if you want to know how did it start? How did the Noetic Institute start? Well, over 50 years ago, Dr. Edgar Mitchell became the sixth person to walk on the moon. And as a member of the Apollo 14 mission, his purpose was to conduct an in-depth research on the lunar surface. As his mission came to an end, an entirely new purpose emerged, one that would define his life for decades to come and contribute to the awakening of the planet. As his spaceship traveled back from the moon amidst the vast darkness of the cosmos, Dr. Mitchell's eyes became fixed on the blue sphere that we call home. As he entered the Earth's atmosphere, he was enveloped by a profound sense of universal connectedness. And as such, he decided to develop ions so that people could do research and see how all of this is interconnected, because it's not just science. It's not just one thing or another. There's this whole interconnectedness. So IONS is about bridging scientific exploration and experimental discovery to better understand a timeless truth that humanity is deeply interconnected. And the national organization is based in California, and you are invited to sign up for it. You can go to IONS .org, and you will find that, and you can sign up for, they have wonderful free classes and some paid for classes, but it's a wonderful organization if you want to go more in depth. Another thing about us is that we have another meeting next month on April 12th, and Eva Zygmunt is giving us a talk on the shaman's gift to a quantum universe. All right, so come for that, because you know that's going to be mind blowing. It's going to get into your heart, and you're just going, wow. So I encourage you to join us for our meetings. I encourage you to now welcome Mark Ryan as he introduces our speaker, Tom Cole.
Well, good evening. We at Houston Ions are delighted. For emphasis.
I thought I turned it off. Very new.
Is that for me?
Those are the trumpets that are for to have with us for this first presentation at our new venue, my eminent friend, Dr. Thomas Cole. For some 2 decades, until 2022, Tom served as the founding director of the McGovern Center for Humanities and Ethics at the University of Texas Health Science Center. His broad academic field has been medical humanities, applying the humanities to issues in medicine and health. A few years ago, he published a major textbook in that field. And to these, all of his investigations, really, he has brought imagination and creativity. He, for example, even to filmmaking. Tom has made films on subjects such as surviving strokes and the relationship between medical students and the cadavers that they study, as well as to unrelated topics, such as a celebrated documentary on one man's role in the desegregation of Houston. Within medical humanities, Tom's focus has been on the social history of aging. Among the 14 books that he has written or edited is his celebrated volume, The Journey of Life, subtitled as A Cultural History of Aging in America, which was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He is co-editor of the prestigious Oxford Book of Aging, and his work has been featured in cultural forums such as the New York Times, PBS, the National Public Radio, and he has served as a consultant for such august institutions as the President's Council on Bioethics and the United Nations NGO Committee on Aging. I had the blessing of meeting Tom some decade and a half ago, which has given me the opportunity to see his capacious mind as it has expanded well beyond strictly academic work. His most recent book, Old Man Country, takes a more personal and, I'd say, personal revealing tack, appealing to a broader audience. And his own life, I would say this has come about as his own life has caught up with his subject of gerontology. But beyond that, as Tom stepped down from his distinguished academic career, I've been privileged to watch and share in conversations as his intellectual focus expanded profoundly into spiritual realms. Drawing on his Jewish heritage, Tom took up intensive studies in spiritual direction and has undergone what I believe he would call a major spiritual renewal. Since 2021, he has been spiritual director at Temple Beth Israel in Houston. And currently, Tom is completing a memoir on this seraphic journey. And that will be the subject of his comments tonight. So please welcome Dr. Thomas Swift.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I got to be so old I can barely get up to the lectern. So many thanks for the honor of addressing you and being here. What I'll be doing is reading some sections from this memoir in progress called My Journey to the Angels Towards a Spiritual Renewal. And I'll begin with a narrative of my own physical decline in the last 8 years, and then move towards my spiritual awakening and suggest why I think spiritual renewal is a cultural priority today in general. And this, as Mark said, this period includes a transition in my life from being a full-time medical school humanities faculty to becoming a spiritual director. In the fall of 2018, I started waking up exhausted every morning, often plagued by pain in my legs or back. I managed to get up around 6:30, shower, dress, and go into the kitchen to make breakfast. About halfway through peeling hard-boiled eggs, heating up water for tea, and turning on the coffee maker, I needed to sit down in my comfy gray living room chair and rest for several minutes. Then I finished making breakfast, and we ate together, looking eastward. My wife and I, Thelma Jean Goodrich, ate together, looking eastward over the trees and the path along Buffalo Bayou, 16 stories below. I was able to make it to my UT office for morning meetings and teaching. In the afternoon, I'd close my door and lie down on the floor for 15 minutes to get through the rest of the day. My fatigue kept getting worse until I became so exhausted I could barely drive. I couldn't exercise, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't write. My doctors tested for every disease imaginable: blood disease, infectious diseases, dementia, heart disease, kidney, pancreas, stomach, vitamin deficiencies, and other pathologies. Dr. Shaw said that I would get better, that he would get to the bottom of this. Yeah, I thought, but I'm the one who has to fight through brain fog and look every day at bony hands, at forearms that look like pickup sticks, and biceps that look like they were preserved in those clear glass containers of body parts in the anatomy lab. Fortunately, my medical school teaching was online, and I could attend meetings remotely. After months of looking, my physicians couldn't find a culprit, and they began using the term chronic fatigue syndrome, which meant they couldn't find a single cause. CFS is not treatable or curable. It can last years or a lifetime. The chief of infectious disease looked at the lab results and declared that I didn't have Lyme disease, the chief suspect. My daughter-in-law, Myla McManus, a functional medicine doctor, thought otherwise. Using different blood tests and markers, she started treating me with specialized infusions that take aim at multiple strands of bacteria in Lyme disease, which had long been hidden away after a childhood tick bite in the Connecticut woods. Turns out that Lyme disease was only one of many little bugs long hiding in my blood, waiting for my immune system to weaken and allow them to invade my body. Other problems awaited me. In the fall of 2019, I developed so much pain in my lower back I could barely walk. Like my mother, I was suffering from degenerative arthritis in the lower spine. My neurosurgeon, John Caridi, worried that with further nerve damage in the lower spine, I could lose control of both legs. He suggested a spinal fusion to relieve the pressure on my sciatic nerve. He would put in artificial discs between 3 lumbar vertebrae and hold them together with rods and screws. Caridi said the operation is successful in 80% of the patients. I'll take those odds, I told him. A month later, Caridi put me down on the operating table, slid open my back, inserted 3 artificial discs, and put in metal rods and screws to hold it all together. After the operation, a nurse got me out of bed and walked me around the hospital floor. Gotta keep moving, she said. You have to walk 20 minutes every 2 hours. After I got home, I followed orders. One night, about 2 a.m, I got out of bed, walked dutifully 4 trips around the hallway of our 16th floor condominium, and then 2 trips around the apartment. On the last trip, I stopped and looked through the sliding glass door that leads to our balcony. A large black vulture was sitting on the railing, at least 2 feet tall. A gray pockmarked mask wrapped itself under his beak, around his small black eyes, and up over his forehead. Boot spurs spread out between his thin speckled legs, his long beak hooked down to a vicious tip. I looked at him silently in the dark and gently tapped on the window. He turned. Our eyes met. We sized each other up. Don't even think about it, I said, and kept walking. Recovery from surgery went well, but exhaustion persisted. Every morning in the spring of 2020, I would put on my clothes, go into the kitchen. I was shaky, my neck hurt, my jaws were clenched, and I had to sit down after fixing breakfast. In the afternoons, I had to lie down for hours. I looked up late-stage chronic Lyme disease. 40% of us can't work, 25% are disabled, 10% cannot get out of bed or shower. More and more, I thought about dying, about the conditions under which my life would not be worth living. More spinal deterioration, more exhaustion, less than an hour of real life each day. I was haunted by fears of becoming depressed and a terrible burden on my wife, Thelma Jean, and my children. Despite my chronic fatigue syndrome, Thelma Jean and I maintained our weekly Saturday morning ritual. We would drive to get a Starbucks breakfast, park on North Boulevard, and enjoy drinking our coffee in a neighborhood of large houses that exuded beauty and class privilege. We loved to sit beneath southern live oak trees, some of them at least 100 years old, that had survived violent hurricanes and long outlived the men who had cut off their lower limbs. I had always loved live oak trees, whose low branches seemed to bow down and offer you a tray of chocolate. On both sides of the street, their top branches reached across each other and towards each other, gifting us with shade. They seemed to meet, embrace, and kiss in a dancing canopy that stretched a long way down the street. One Saturday morning, while I was drinking my cappuccino and eating egg whites and roasted red peppers, I looked up and was lifted up and out of my body. I rested in a beauty I had never seen before. Everything was astonishingly vivid, more colorful, more vibrant. Amidst my body's pain, my spirit had awakened to a peaceful awe, like that timeless moment in my 5th grade classroom when a brilliant white light comforted me and obscured everything else in the classroom. I thought this was a singular, mystical experience, but soon it happened occasionally when I drove through tunnels of live oaks at Rice University or walked down the tree-lined path that winds its way around Herman Park. And then it happened often. Wherever I looked, everything in my sight was altered, filtered through a timeless, calm beauty, carrying truths I did not yet know. Not just bluebonnets, Mexican hat flowers, black-eyed Susans, and crepe myrtle blossoms, but also cement trucks, signs pointing to Route 45 to Dallas, fallen leaves, and the Hispanic workers raking them up, rain falling against our condo windows, the prayer plant rising toward the sun in our living room, street signs pointing to the Houston Astros Stadium, clouds of polluting smoke rising from the oil refineries 40 miles away, traffic jams, auto wrecks. Just as I began to feel comfortable with these inexplicable moments of awe and beauty, I was also drawn into equally impossible, invisible, and frightening worlds. One night, Thelma Jean and I were having dinner with friends at Damien's restaurant, fortunately it's closed, on Louisiana Street in Houston. As always, conversation flowed easily from topic to topic. Suddenly, I was not at the table. I was across the room watching a couple as they ate pasta and drank wine. When I came back, no one had noticed I was gone. This happened 2 or 3 times during the dinner. I was confused and frightened. When we got home, I told Thelma Jean what had happened and that I was terrified. Was this a stroke? A brain aneurysm? Was I psychotic? Was this the beginning of dementia? Thelma Jean is a psychotherapist. She wasn't worried. I was dissociating, she said, temporarily disconnecting myself from myself and the world around me, an experience not entirely uncommon among those feeling very anxious or stressed. Don't worry, she said. Dissociation and hallucinations are not necessarily forms of mental illness. They're just sometimes responses to stress. Perhaps, I thought to myself, my dissociation was partly an escape from physical distress, but I knew there was more to my experience than dissociation. My spirit had truly left my body. I felt mystified, caught between awe and terror. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening, nor was I ready to grasp or embrace the truth that I was becoming an ancient mariner in a landscape I didn't believe existed. As a scholar, academic, I had long written about the paradox of physical decline and spiritual growth. Now it was my turn to live it. My body was declining of its own accord. My spiritual muscle, though, needed regular exercise to grow. I began reciting traditional Jewish prayers in Hebrew and English each morning. I thanked God for restoring my soul, granting me another day of life. Each evening, I asked for a tranquil night of slumber and prayed to awaken to the light of a new day. Behold the splendor of your light. These prayers strengthened the muscle of my thankfulness, my gratitude for simply being alive. They reminded me that every breath is a gift, never to be taken for granted. I continued my meditation practice and noticed that actually I was becoming more mindful, more able to observe my thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without judgment. My monkey mind, constantly thinking about what I had to do next or what I had forgotten to do, settled down. I began spending more time in the woods along Brace Bayou, breathing in the beauty of Spanish moss hanging from the limbs of southern live oak trees, comforted by the crushed leaves beneath my feet, surrounded by sacred nature. A few months later, I found myself kneeling in our medical school breezeway with dozens of students and colleagues. George Floyd had just been murdered. We stayed on our knees for 9.5 minutes, as did millions of people in cities across the globe who protested the racism and police brutality that had killed him. I also attended Floyd's Houston funeral at the Fountain of Praise Church. Entering the sanctuary, I sat down in a pew, looked up, and there was a large looming portrait of Floyd painted on the wall behind the pulpit. Large white angel wings rested on either side of Floyd's shoulders. A halo floated above his head. I blinked. I looked again. The angel wings and the halo were still there. Soon after Floyd's funeral, I began to see angels everywhere. Carved white wooden angel wings for sale, at Star Furniture, where we were buying a floor lamp, the young man behind the counter at Dromgool's stationery store, whose name was Angel. When I walked outside of Dromgool's, my eyes fell on a clothing store named Fallen Angel. I got in the car, turned on the radio, and the announcer was talking about angels. I was smitten. There I was, sitting in my steaming hot car in the middle of Rice Village in Houston, Texas, surrounded by images of angels. I still don't have words for the experience. I was alternately shocked, surprised, confused, intrigued, frightened, amazed, incredulous, excited, embarrassed, self-doubting, ashamed, awed, immobilized, and open to the possibility of the impossible. While I knew this was not an accident, I could not get my head around it, but neither could I let it go. I decided to study angels and write about them. When I started studying angels, I did not realize that I was ill-equipped to understand the subject. I had no idea of the limits of traditional scholarly research, which tends to exclude that which cannot be observed or measured and explained by reason, basically cordoning off inquiry into the invisible spiritual world. I never imagined that many scientists and scholars approach angels simply by denying their reality. The very word angel evokes their scorn. Actually, I should have learned this in my 50s, while I was having trouble finishing the introduction to Stories as Equipment of Living, a posthumous book by the Jewish anthropologist Barbara Meyerhoff. One night, while resting in bed in a hotel room at a meeting in Washington, D.C., I closed my eyes and spoke to Barbara. I told her that I was frightened and stuck, and she answered. As I later wrote in the introduction, "You are older now than I was when I died," Barbara said to me. "Do not be afraid. Say what you know to be true. The world of spirit is real. Moral and spiritual growth is the main fruit of living a long life." I never knew Barbara Meyerhoff when she was alive, but speaking to me that night, she was an angel, bringing messages of divine plenty from heavenly realms. A palpable energy passed through my body and mind, my personal reception of Barbara's wisdom. While the Meyerhoff book was being considered for publication, a senior editor at the University of Virginia Press called me, and she was a friend of mine. "Would love to publish the book," she said, "on one condition." "Yes?" "The word angel needs to be deleted from the introduction. One of our reviewers insists that it is not appropriate for scholarly discourse." I refused. I knew nothing about angels. I did know that I had been visited by one. The book's editors and I withdrew the book from Virginia Press and eventually found another publisher. When I began learning about angels, I was confused. Part of me yearned for absolute truth. Maybe, just maybe, I would come upon stable, reliable knowledge that would answer life's deepest questions. Another part of me resisted the very idea of angels. They were just the stuff of fairy tales, childhood religion, mere creatures of imagination to soothe my longing to know what can never be known. And I was frightened, afraid of the unknown, afraid of not knowing, afraid of experiences I didn't understand, afraid of appearing foolish to my academic colleagues, afraid of violating my Father Bert's semi-religious doctrine, only the material is real. Yet I refused to succumb to my fears and confusion. I kept reading, watching films, listening to podcasts and songs, talking to people on the street. I resisted the impulse to close my heart and mind in the face of my own experiences. Slowly, I acknowledged to myself that angel experiences are actually quite common. Recent polls show that 70% of Americans believe in angels, a figure consistent with recent data collected in the UK and Europe. More than 50% of Americans report that they have been protected from harm by a guardian angel. Survivors of the Holocaust, in particular, report that they were saved by a guardian angel. John Mekas, for example, twice escaped Nazi death camps before migrating to New York to become a filmmaker. At 92, he spoke to New York Times reporter John Leland about the angels who had protected him throughout his life. Confidence in his angels allowed him to face uncertainties without worrying. I don't think about what I have to do, he told John. I just do it, hoping that that's what my fate is. If I have problems that emerge, I say, okay, I'll leave it alone for now. I'll leave it alone, and as time goes by, it very often straightens itself out. I say, okay, I cannot deal with it. So you, angels, now it's your job. You work on it, and I'll do something else. And usually they do it. Trust. That's what I advise if anyone asks. You have to trust your angels. Still, nothing in my background, academic background, prepared me to take the invisible spiritual world seriously. I was a well-educated humanities scholar. I was a writer, a filmmaker. Well into my adulthood, I took for granted that the soul was a metaphor, that supernatural experiences were only the stuff of sci-fi movies, that encounters with God were hallucinations, that miraculous saints were wishful thinking of naive believers, that mushrooms and psychoactive drugs led only to fantasies and feelings that people could brag about and call spiritual. Encounters with God, near-death experiences, ghosts, other non-human agents, and demonic forces couldn't possibly exist, let alone generate terror, healing, or transformation. These were no more than historical and cultural constructs that reason and science had long debunked. I began devouring books about angels, which quickly filled my bookshelves and piled up on my desk. Angels by the evangelist Billy Graham. A Gathering of Angels, Angels in Jewish Life and Literature by Rabbi Margolis. The Physics of Angels, Exploring the Realm Where Science and Spirit Meet by Brother Matthew Fox and Rupert Sheldrake. Encountering Mystery, Religious Experience in a Secular Age by Dale Allison. The Poetry of Angels, edited by Gene Hansen. These were only a tiny fraction of the vast literature on angels in a few of the books I read. I looked at popular books, scholarly books, sacred texts, books by people wanting to make a quick buck, and by people wanting to share their extraordinary experiences. I began watching films, listening to podcasts, reading sacred texts, and looking at images of angels in the West with my friend and art historian, Bill Howes. I quickly learned that angels, however trivialized by modern science and commercial culture, have been regular features of Western religious and secular history. I began asking friends and colleagues if they knew about angel encounters or had angel experiences of their own. The stories came flooding in. My chiropractor, Rick Peters, told me the story of his son, Sam, who was hit by a car going 20 miles an hour, thrown onto the windshield. He rolled over, jumped off the hood of the car, and kept walking as if nothing had happened. The only way I can understand this, Rick said to me, is to think he was rescued by a guardian angel. The next day, when I told Rick's story to my dear friend Mark, he told me one of his own. When Mark's grandfather was dying as a young boy, none of the doctors could help him. His grandmother changed his name to fool the angel of death. It worked. When I told Thelma Jean this story, she told me of her own encounter with the angel of death. One night, while she was recovering from a frightening, and painful surgery, she looked around the room, across the room, and saw a robed man sitting in a chair across the room. He stood up and came towards her. "No, not now," she said, holding her outstretched hand up like a policeman stopping traffic. The man sat back down and disappeared. When I told stories like this to my colleague and friend Angela Gomez, she had a story as well. When she was a young girl, Angela slipped in a swimming pool and slid down over her head. She couldn't swim or reach the ladder a few feet away. A hand reached down and pulled her hand to the ladder. Angela stepped up the ladder and looked around. There was nobody there. I began asking strangers if they'd had encounters with angels. Most of them said yes. Virtually none of them had ever told anyone for fear of ridicule. Yet they were happy to share them with me because they knew I would not judge them. One exception was a New York City Indian cab driver who, head wrapped in a strong white turban, looked around anxiously to make sure no Hindu authority was looking. He turned off his meter and whispered the story of an unseen presence who accompanied him through the hell of immigration. He had never told his Hindu priest or friends at his temple for fear of being an outcast. After 15 minutes, he thanked me for listening with tears in his eyes. I started asking people everywhere I went. I talked to friends, colleagues, people in my congregation, nurses, attendants in doctors' offices, physicians' assistants, doctors who only told me in confidence, secretaries, clergy from different denominations, my athletic trainer, my African limousine driver, grocery store clerks, pharmacy students, hospital janitors, cleaning staff, academic colleagues, Uber drivers and transcriptionists, IT personnel, and many others I can't even remember. I began learning about angels with a healthy skepticism, but I simply had to believe the angel stories told by people whose honesty and authenticity I trusted. Each story was a new and surprising peek into a world I didn't think existed. I was consistently astonished, amazed, inspired, and confused. Looking back at my own early awakenings, I see how closely tied they were to my physical decline. And strangely enough, I now see that both my physical decline and my spiritual growth have been tied to my lifelong love of the woods. Behind the houses across the street from my home in New Haven, Connecticut, I often played and wandered in the seemingly vast section of woods adjoining the Yale golf course. Part of me grew up in those Connecticut woods. With my brother and sister and friends, I would often cross the street and weave a path along the property line in between houses and enter those magical woods. I loved being in the woods, especially in the spring when I'd sit down and marvel at the little pockets of snow that survived in the shadows of the warming sun. During high school, I'd sit there on a blanket with my girlfriend, Meryl, who just sent me a really nice happy birthday wish, munching on sandwiches and declaring our love. Our love was real, but the disease I picked up from a tick bite in those woods lasted much longer than that love. Somewhere in those woods, sometime, during many years of climbing, laughing, playing, building, walking, sledding, a small black-legged tick must have bitten me and deposited its arsenal of Borrelia bacteria, which waited until my late teens to burst into mononucleosis. Afterwards, the Borrelia troops stood by patiently again until my 60s, when they overran my immune system and burst into full-blown Lyme disease and other undiagnosed symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome. It was awful to watch my muscles wasting away, to witness my energy diminishing every day, to wonder where it would all end. In reading about chronic fatigue syndrome, I came to realize that my illness would wax and wane for the rest of my life. I also learned that those who live with chronic fatigue syndrome do not live shorter lives, except for an increase in suicide, which I had already ruled out entirely. I would never do to my family what my father had done to me. Despite my physical decline, I felt blessed. My disciplined spiritual practices had actually changed me. Regular meditation had created stable neural pathways, train tracks of a newly quiet and loving presence. Daily prayers instilled a deep and enduring gratitude, reminding me that each breath is a gift from God, never to be taken for granted. And I felt called to study, learn, embody, and share mysterious, mystical truths. That the essence of God is within and all around us, and that angels, God's messengers, are everywhere, waiting to to be let in if only we can open our hearts and expand our awareness. As I learned to truly awaken to the light of each new day, it became clear that I wanted to support others in need of healing and spiritual growth. Why don't you become a spiritual director? Elma Jean asked one night. It's who you already are without the title. But isn't that a Christian thing? I asked. I don't know. Why don't you find out? My decision to pursue formal training as a spiritual director was not a difficult one. I needed it for my own growth, and it was a logical outcome of what I had been doing for others undercover. Formal spiritual guidance comes in a wide variety of forms, most of them tied to the search for ultimate meaning in religion. In the Christian tradition, the roots of spiritual direction lie in the Desert Fathers and Mothers of the early 4th century. Those who left the cities of Asia Minor and traveled to desert areas to live a life focused solely on God. Disciples traveled many miles to receive a word of guidance or salvation. What became known as spiritual direction was the exclusive province then of Christian denominations, especially Catholic and Orthodox, for many centuries. In the 20th century, spiritual direction training programs became formalized, and spiritual direction itself spread beyond the boundaries of religion into hospitals, medical practices, schools, and even corporations. Spiritual direction has emerged within Judaism only in the last 40 years, when developing a personal relationship with God started to reemerge as an important feature of Jewish religious life. In Jewish spiritual guidance, Finding Our Way to God, Carol Oakes and Carrie Olitsky introduced the topic this way. We have no concern more central than to live our lives in a deepening relationship with God. But this concern is often disguised as a vague disquiet or misnamed as restlessness. Frequently, we need the help of someone other than ourselves to understand our own heart's desire. Finding a spiritual guide can be the prelude to a transformative experience. Unfortunately, there's a dearth of spiritual guides in Jewish religious life, and even some of them are unrecognizable as such. They do their work quietly and with no fanfare. I was trained as a spiritual director by Rabbi Jim Ponette, former Jewish chaplain at Yale, whom I met over dinner one night at the home of Mark Ryan and Ginger Clarkson. Rabbi Ryan at Beth Israel approved Jim's curriculum, took part in an ordination ceremony, and hired me as a part-time spiritual director at Beth Israel. Now, Jim, for those of you, unfortunately, who don't know him, is a mystical, metaphysical counterpuncher. When you offer an idea or an argument, it will soon be deconstructed, melt into thin air. He thinks that we are prisoners of our own delusions. Most of us see only projections of ourselves. We hide from the nothingness that is God. Most of us only see projections of ourselves. I understand this idea. Like psychoanalysis, it removes the ground beneath your self-story, leaving you defenseless against sometimes frightening truths you can neither understand nor master. I used to tease Jim and tell him that I'm quite happy with my pragmatic half-truths that get me through the day. This led to many boxing matches in which neither of us aimed at a knockout, only to keep learning from each other. For 2 years, I read sacred and scholarly texts while writing and speaking with Jim each week. I read Ethics of the Fathers, a volume of Talmud, the central text in Rabbinic Judaism, written between the 2nd and the 6th centuries of the Common Era. Talmud is foreign to me. I've always recoiled from it. Because I can only read bits and pieces of Hebrew and no Aramaic, I tend to feel ignorant or bored or inadequate reading it in English. And yet it's familiar. There are times when I swell up into a text I have never read as if it is a prayer. While reading, for example, commentary on what it means to judge others favorably, I find myself rocking back and forth, swaying side to side. the way my grandfather and my ancestors prayed not only with their lips, but also with their bodies. And there are scary times as well, as when I write in my journal, I am mute. I am in tears. I cannot think. I have a secret I cannot share. I am afraid of who I am. So I'm a different person than the one who started writing this spiritual autobiography 5 years ago. It's not just that I'm older and that my body's changed. My experience of simply being has changed. I am more often flooded with beauty, more fully alive, more fully present. I didn't make this happen, but neither is it an accident. After years of pursuing my life as a spiritual journey, with the love and help of many others, I have been blessed with a spiritual awakening that emerged unpredictably. Somehow, my consciousness shifted into a higher gear of more love, more compassion, and unity with nature. I say this not to brag or to claim that I fully understand, but to add my voice calling to those calling for cultural spiritual renewal and the reenchantment of nature. I was born in the middle of the 20th century. Like almost everyone else I knew, I grew up under the reign of materialist science, which places an impenetrable wall between the spiritual and the physical, and generally denies the reality of things it can't see, touch, feel, and measure. I also grew up under the reign of capitalist materialism, which pledges allegiance to the accumulation of wealth and sees the natural world in terms of exploitable resources rather than as a sacred place to encounter the holiness all around us and inside us. It's time to liberate ourselves from the reign of both materialisms, which handcuff our imagination, shrink the sphere of the sacred, deny the reality of angels and the spiritual world, limit our capacity to find our own paths to the divine, and undermine our commitments to kindness, justice, and the future of our planet. In this day and time, I believe that we must fulfill our humanity individually and collectively by re-envisioning and reimagining our connection to the sacred. We must open our hearts to see, feel, and share transcendent experiences, become angels in our own right. Perhaps most important, we must recover the sacred in nature. Throughout most of human history, nature was understood as the bearer of sacred meanings, a mystery to be treated with respect and care. In the modern world, nature fell silent. Cosmos has become opaque, inert, silent, wrote the anthropologist Mircea Eliade in 1957. Is it possible for us 21st century humans to learn once again to see the cosmos as alive, sentient, filled with mystery? Yes, answers Karen Armstrong in Sacred Nature, restoring our ancient bond with the natural world. It is both possible and necessary. One way to begin, she suggests, is by recovering an overview of God that was traditional among medieval European Christians who understood God not as a separate being, but as being itself, the divine essence at the heart of all things, a truth that was traditionally shared by peoples of the Middle East, India, and China. Another affirming voice is that of Alistair McGrath, whose book, The Reenchantment of Nature, calls on Christianity to reawaken our wonder and respect for the natural world. McGrath argues that to avoid ecological disaster, it's essential to reawaken our sense of awe and look at the world as a glorious creation, an irreplaceable gift of God. From the Amazon rainforests and other indigenous territories, Iago Carmones reports the voices of elders who are calling for re-enchantment of the world, for recovering the sacred gaze, seeing rivers as veins of the earth, trees as guardians, animals as messengers, and human beings as part of a living cosmos. Such re-enchantment, she emphasizes, requires not superstition or naivete, but a deep shift in perception. As she writes, re-enchantment is not about returning to the past, but about weaving ancient wisdom with modern knowledge to create a new harmony. A similar approach to nature is taken by Robert McFarlane, whose book, Is a River Alive?, takes readers on a mind-bending journey of travel writing, reportage, and natural history. After following him from cloud forests and mountain streams of Ecuador through wounded lagoons and creeks of India to wild rivers in Canada, I heartily agree with his answer. Yes, rivers are indeed living beings, threatened by mining, pollution, and dams, and they should be understood as such in imagination and in law. Likewise, we learn from Suzanne Simard's Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest. That trees she studied in Northwest Canada actually live together in an underground web of interdependence, of tree-to-tree communication through fungal networks. Older trees provide food and water to their young ones, sending signals through chemicals identical to our own neurotransmitters. More and more people today are resacralizing nature, which is no longer a backdrop to climate solutions, but is itself a solution. Rivers, forests, streams, wetlands, mountains, and reefs are increasingly seen as sacred systems that protect and nourish and heal. They deserve our reverence and our protection. The earth, writes Thomas Berry, is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. Last night, as the sun was setting, I took my daily walk along Bray's Bayou in Houston and turned into the small conservation forest less than a mile away from our condo. I walked along the wood-chipped path, found my favorite log, sat down, and closed my eyes. The woods are a place where my soul goes often to recover itself these days. I close my eyes, I meditate, and listen to the living beings all around me. Not only the birds and bats, mosquitoes, crickets, squirrels, chipmunks, lizards, ants, and spiders, but to an entire symphony of mostly unknown kin. The silent groans of the trees, leaves rustling in the wind, quiet, swaying bushes, aspiring plants, and expiring flowers. I have become an ancient mariner who has learned that all life is sacred and interconnected, who hopes to live and tries to live in love and reverence, and hopes that my story will inspire you all and my readers to grow into the fullness of your own spiritual presence in the world. Thank you.
Okay, so we would, if you have questions or comments and you would like to ask Dr. Solis, just raise your hand or stand up and ask, and then we'll also turn on, Jared, if we could get the turned on, and then if there were some of the people from the Zoom also have questions, they can, but go ahead.
Now, could you tell us how you pray?
How I pray?
Yes.
Well, in the morning, I wake up and I say the morning prayer, Jewish morning prayer in Hebrew and in English. And I often say it more than once. As a prayer, the Hebrew goes, Modeh ani lefanecha, melech ha-v'chayim, shehechazarta bi nishmati, bechemla rabo emunatecha, which means, I'm grateful to you, living, enduring, ruling spirit of the universe, for restoring my soul to me in compassion. How great is your faithfulness. And if I don't feel the gratefulness, I'll try to say it again. And I offer a similar prayer at the end of the day that I usually read out loud to my wife. And that, if I go to services, or sometimes I'll have an individual prayer just comes to me. I'm not sure what you were interested in finding out.
Well, the spontaneous praying where people just sort of say what they feel, or the fact that we actually use a written text
Right.
that we inherited from the past.
Mm-hmm.
those seem to be two very different kinds of prayers to me.
Right. They are different, but they can be blended. You know, I'm part of a tradition that I've reclaimed. And so I recite the traditional prayers. But I'm also an individual soul who's got his own needs and path. And there are times when I'll just offer a prayer on my own. Usually it's a prayer of gratitude. Sometimes it's a request for help. I'm taking care of my wife who's living with advanced cancer, and every day I read these prayers to her and ask for help, the strength to continue doing that. Mhm.
My friend, Michael Murphy
Uh-huh.
at Esalen,
Yeah.
Jeff Kreipel, Mark's friend,
Mhm.
was chairman of the Esalen Board of Trustees for many years. But one of Michael's favorite quotes
Yeah.
from Sri Aurobindo: apparent nature is secret God.
Say that again.
Apparent nature is secret God. And
What's the adjective before nature?
apparent?
APARENT?
Yeah,
Apparent.
apparent nature. I reduced it to nature is secret God. But I was quoting it verbatim, but nature is secret
Mhm.
God.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And that wisdom,
Yeah.
really, you really speak that in a wonderful way. And thank you,
Thank you.
thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
I like to go out in the morning
Mhm.
when that sun comes up
Mhm.
and address the Creator
Mm.
and kind of Native American way. I have a prayer for each direction,
Mm.
facing east,
Mhm.
then south, then west, then north.
Lovely.
And yeah, and I was taught that by Native Americans.
Mhm.
I love their word for God,
Mhm.
great mystery,
Mhm.
the great mystery.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's,
Thank you for sharing that.
all right, thank you for your presentation. It's marvelous.
Oh, thank you.
And have you completed your book? Can we buy it?
I'm looking for an agent and a publisher. It's pretty well.
Angels are coming to help you.
I'm ready. Bam.
Can I pray for something that I'm concerned about? I don't, it feels to me sometimes like I bring up the anxiety with that prayer. How can I release the anxiety? You know, I get wrapped up in what I'm praying for.
All right.
How do I let it all go? It's hard because it's so up
Yeah.
for me. It's up in my mind, my
Yeah.
feelings.
Do you meditate?
Well, probably I do. I connect throughout the day, but not like a formal meditation.
Mhm. Yeah. I found that breathing meditation allows me, I have found that breathing meditations allow me to release anxiety.
What is that? A breathing meditation?
Well, there's so many different types of breathing meditations, but one of them is just to close your eyes and count 4 on the in breath, and 4 on the out breath. That's all.
You just help your mind go there.
Just, yeah, it grounds you in your physical body
Mhm.
and helps take attention away from things you might be worried about.
Okay.
But I'm sure there are plenty of people here who could give you advice about how to meditate or groups to meditate in.
Yeah.
So I would definitely,
Right here,
let's go for it.
Monday night. Oh, Insight Meditation Houston,
Mhm.
free. 7 p.m. to 8:30.
Alejandro Chaul is a master of meditation.
Although he lives in Costa Rica now.
But he's here now.
He's here tonight. If you ever get a hold of him.
Go to Costa.
Yeah,
That's a nature that supports it.
Yes.
And you're talking to people when they felt there'd been an intervention. How did people differentiate between angel, spirit, God?
nobody knows.
But is it how they described it?
Yeah.
So would you ask the question, giving them the word angel? Or would you ask the question saying, have you ever had a, metaphysical, spiritual experience?
Yeah. I usually ask if they had experiences with angels, but they'll often tell me stories of experiences with spiritual presences in general that are invisible. And whether you call it an angel or not, I think the idea to help people is to ask them to open their hearts to what they long for, what they need, and learn forms of meditation or prayer that allow them to focus. To me, this is one way of raising our consciousness to a higher level. I don't know if that makes any sense.
We have a question on the chat, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to read it out? Will you read it out for the room?
Yeah. It's interesting that you title your talk Journey to the Angels. Do you feel like the angels were always with you?
I don't think so. I think it's only a fairly recent awareness that I've come to. And it comes and goes. I mean, the person who asked that question, do you have those angel experiences?
Yes, I think so. I think that a common title would be Journey with the Angels.
Okay.
I loved your poetry in the way you spoke, and I understand why you chose that word, Journey to the Angels, and I imagine that you carefully select each word, so you consciously chose to instead of with.
Right. Yeah, because for me, it was coming to an experience of the angelic, rather than having the experiences that they were always with me. But if so much of this is it's all subjective. It's your own emotional and spiritual awareness and openness to what you don't understand, and try to open yourself to and accept in the hope of more love, more compassion.
Well, thank you for asking people about their angel stories and giving people a chance to speak about that, because I know, like with my experiences, yes, we don't commonly share. I'll tell you. I feel like I have an angel. I call him Bob. He helps me with home repair projects. Like he helps me with tools and stuff like that.
Send him over.
Thanks.
Love to meet him. Holly.
Well, first, thank you. Knowing you before meeting the angels and during, I love your way of sharing. You also mentioned nature, and maybe everyone knows that there's an exhibit now at the MFAH called Buddha in Nature. And they use kind of, so Buddha nature is also that angel, that spirit, that natural state of mind that we all have, but also they're using it as the nature and how that helps us reconnect.
Lovely.
with that nature. So
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's a current.
I hope we all can take advantage of that. What a nature. Mhm.
I enjoyed your references on nature. All those books, you just kind of went down the list. I'm getting them, but I guess I have to wait till you publish your book. Yeah.
Well, I hope it happens soon. Thank you.
We'll be praying for that. That angel's gonna.
Angels publication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Marco, well then, I'm sorry, then,
Oh, go ahead.
sir.
You mentioned the story of the Hindu cab driver who shared his experience with an angel.
Yeah,
Are you aware of any aversion to the idea of an angel in the Hindu belief system?
no. Can you help us out here?
Because you said that he looked around as if not wanting to mention the angel in the presence of the Hindu priests.
Yeah.
I guess you.
I think he was afraid they would think he was out of line or, not towing the sort of orthodox way of Hindu thinking. That's just my guess. It's scary stuff. I mean, it's not, you can't just act like this is easy. Like, this is out of control. This is out of our control. And, the journey for each of us, I think, is to raise our level of awareness and consciousness and become more loving and compassionate in whatever ways in our religious life or spiritual life or meditation life we can find to do that. So go and do it. Marco.
This is raising up.
I'm in trouble now.
Some of my early Catholic, whatever I absorbed. But as I recall.
Right down the street here.
Yeah, right. As I recall, there was a whole science of angels in Thomistic theology, in which there was a clear hierarchy.
Yep.
7 choirs, up the scale, very hierarchically
Seraphim, the
arranged.
cherubim.
Yeah, right. And then ultimately you would have angels with clear personalities like Saint Michael the Archangel. But you speak of it in a much more experiential sort of way, without the either elucidation or baggage of that tradition.
Yeah.
Where, as it came across to me, and I'm sure it was generated by people who had real experiences, but as it came across to me, it was something you were supposed to learn about the hierarchy of the heavens, but it was never taught as something that would be really experiential.
Well, it's waiting for you to go back to it.
Well, I'm
reclaiming it.
My question is, how useful do you find that in the context of your unfolding spirituality today?
I think it's easy to get caught up in overly intellectualized concepts of what are angels, who are the seraphim and the cherubim, and I think we can use those points of view, those frameworks, to shape our perspective, but we have to be able to connect the head and the heart. We can't just live with what we're taught. It doesn't get genuinely to our own spiritual growth and our ability to grow and support the growth of others. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
You know,
I mean, it's, I tend not to spend too much time in that area. Although there's a chapter in my book on what I've learned, kind of boring.
We'll skip that, Dick.
Read it closely.
Did I understand that you spoke of working with Barbara Marx Hubbard?
Barbara Meyerhoff.
Or not Barbara Marx Hubbard? Okay.
Barbara Meyerhoff.
Well, I met her in 2003, and she thought that she related to the universe as beloved.
Mm.
She
Tell us her name again.
Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Hubbard.
And it's a spiritual teacher, actually, at an Islands Conference in 2003. She related to the universe as beloved. She related to herself as beloved, and she personalized the relationship. And she also taught co-creation. She and the universe co-created.
Co-creation of the universe or co-creation of our reality?
Herself and interacting with the universe. Well, there
Interesting.
was a co-creation.
Yeah.
And in any event, I studied her work and began playing with those ideas.
Yeah.
And for the last 20 years, I wake up in the morning and my first thought is, beloved all that is, and I, beloved Joe, co-create beloved yet.
Good for you.
Lovely.
Good for you. We should tape that up on the wall and take it home. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yum.
And so when I think of angels, I think of the Christian tradition, but they must be paralleled in all other wisdom traditions. Like in Judaism, is there a word for
Malach.
Sorry,
Malach, which means messenger.
Yes.
Malachim, angels are messengers of God. They're sent to bring us messages from God.
And do you think, maybe this is to Ginger and allies, the bodhisattvas in Buddhist tradition, would that be angels?
It feels.
It's a bodhisattva that's similar to an angel?
I would say in the Buddhist tradition, the Dakinis, for example, that are the female goddesses and the Daka, the gods, can be thought as angels as well. As you said before, I think, the moment that we give it a term, in a way, it constrains the mystery of the fullness of what they are.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point is developing the courage to not know, to encounter the mystery yourself. And we can use words, but the reality is mysterious. Just so many things we just don't know. Who or what, or where God is, or when God is. Sir.
Hi. Yes, I wasn't gonna ask this until you said that. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I was calling. And I wouldn't even be saying this if it wasn't this group, because this is something that I kept super private. When I was a teenager in the 80s, I got this program from something nobody ever heard of, then called the Monroe Institute. And
so what institute?
The Monroe Institute. Which,
Oh, yeah.
which, yeah, I know. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it here. And I was all in, except I was this sort of a product of my time, very empirical, and I wasn't in for the whole journey. Which if you're not familiar, they use ways of influencing your brain waves to push you into some pretty deep meditative states, which some people allow find can move them out of their body and travel and do all kinds of things. Now, at the beginning of each of these exercises, you'll hear Robert Monroe say an affirmation, which includes seek the help of entities. And I just skipped over that. I'm going on to Focus 12 and Focus, et cetera. I even got some bootleg Focus 15s at the time. So, and I was out of time, I assure you. Didn't even know where my body was in the room, but I wasn't traveling. And but you know, decades later, I got interested again. And while I'm still psychedelic naive, I don't intend to remain that way, but I am. In the learning more and more about that, you hear these people, particularly with some particular psychedelics, meet entities that they cannot distinguish as part, I cannot identify as part of themselves. My question is kind of about angel, what might be angel adjacent? And so your comment about not knowing and perhaps the diversity of angels and these entities and in the Monroe experience, people do find more malignant characters out there also. And also benign ones and helpful ones that they seek the help from. So, and now we're also living in sort of this time where all of this is really becoming not so esoteric. You know, it's becoming much more, you know, common to be able to talk about these things and without being seen as too strange. But yeah, so that's my question about like what might be angel adjacent or you know, and I don't know what a DMT robot is. Someday I might learn. But it's another example of perhaps maybe something that's angel adjacent. And by the way, you may not have mentioned this, but just but you mentioned wings, and the first creature with wings in your talk was the vulture. So you might have thought of that, of course.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know how to respond to that. There's so many interesting ideas there. I suppose I would just generally say that once you open yourself to the reality of an invisible world, you don't know the various beings that are in that. Angels, fallen angels, other beings. And if people more learned or more experienced, developed than I am, might be able to answer that question. But it would make perfect sense that there would be other beings.
Yeah, I guess
that we would not know how to understand or relate to. And we might give them a name.
Yeah.
But to me, the hardest thing was, and I would encourage you all to think about this, open yourself to the experience of what you don't understand.
When Bob and Rose voice would say, you know, sort of open yourself up to these entities that you might meet out there, my brain would just shut right off.
It's scary.
I skipped over that part. Like, okay, move on. I'll start doing the countdown.
Yeah, I'm the last person who would claim to understand that. That's why it's an autobiography.
Tom, I wonder if this has influenced your dreams, and that if angels have come into dreams, and then these moments where you have these experiences feel either dreamlike or dream and reality merge or mingle in any way.
I do find myself during the day in dreamlike moods or experiences. They're clearly an illusion, not something physical, but it doesn't mean it's not real. And so I just try to stay open to the strangeness of what I might be imagining or experiencing, and wait to see if it leads to something else. Yeah.
Is it possible to believe that there are angelic parts in all of us? That we all have ways in which we help each other and we're there for other people? That there, not only are there spiritual angels, but we are all a part of that.
Yeah, the way I understand that in my tradition, there's a creation story myth that is told from one of our ancestor mystics that before God could create the universe, God had to withdraw because God was everything. So God had to withdraw. And then when God got ready to shine the light of creation into the space, the husks, the available material couldn't hold it. And so when God shined God's light into the universe, sparks spattered everywhere. Divine sparks scattered everywhere. In you, in me, in you, and you, and you, and you. There's a divine spark in all of us in this way of thinking. And I think that's another way of thinking, yeah, how do we help it grow? How do we grow that spark and raise that light up back to the Creator? Just a thought. Just a thought. Yeah.
Quick comment and then a question. Native Americans communicate with their ancestors. You could almost substitute the term angel with the Indian cosmology of ancestors. Yeah, and they say that these ancestors become a living presence in your life.
Absolutely.
And here's my question. They call on their ancestors. Do you call on your angel?
I have a relationship with my ancestors. I have a letter that was written in 1751 about an ancestor who, in this little Polish town of Verbalo, who the authorities were going to kill all the Jews because they were using the blood of Christian babies in the Seder, Passover Seder. It's just completely nuts. But this ancestor of mine, Menachem Man, he went to the authorities. He declared that only he was guilty of this. They took his life and they spared the rest of the Jews in the village. If he hadn't done that, I'm not here. So I have a relationship and an obligation to my ancestor. And sometimes it comes in the form of a letter, a dream. But I've decided when I found that out, I realized that I had to live a life worthy of his death. So he exists inside me, for sure. And my obligation to him will go on as long as I live. So that's one example of how I experienced one of my ancestors.
That's a whole book.
Yes, that's a different chapter. But it is really quite amazing.
I have just something to say to you about being, you were the first person that I met when I moved to Houston.
I remember.
And I had an instant spiritual resonance with you.
Yep.
And over the course of your inner work, I feel a palpable change in the way you are, and that you
are coming into the fullness of your kindness
Well, thank
and
you.
your presence. And it's beautiful to be your friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I feel it. Yeah. And it's like, if you do the work, you can change. You can become less frightened, less anxious, more open, God's light, love, passion. Thank you. That's all. Enough about me.
I just loved your talk.
Thank you.
I love the questions.
That was a
and
wonderful
interaction.
conversation.
And we ended up having 17 people on Zoom, which was really nice.
Wow.
So a big thanks to Jared for helping us do that. A big thanks to Covenant for allowing us to use this space. We are so blessed to have this new opportunity to expand and grow. So we thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to Barnaby's in the museum district. They're open until 9. And so we can go there, and I talked to them and they said, bring as many people as you want because there won't be anybody here hardly. So it's the museum district. Let me look real fast on Ben's, I think it is.
Oh, bins.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the one on bins, yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me look it up right fast. I'll give you the exact.
Oh.
Barnaby's Cafe. It's 1801 Ben's. It's called Barnaby's Cafe Museum District. Now, guess what? They have free parking. And if the lower level is full and you go up, just bring your ticket and they will stamp it for you and you will be able to not be charged for any kind of parking. And they are excited to have us come and have an ongoing chat about angels or whatever your connections are.